Okay, so this is going back to the roots because all of these engine designs I've made were all inspired by Kibitz's original steel engine. It's what inspired me to make the smelter engine or basic ingot engine for copper and iron. It's wanted led me to want to make engines for literally everything, although that wasn't really possible in an effective way until update 5 because clipping just throws out the rulebook on what you need to do to make all your belts and lifters work, which is great. And I figured, why not just go through all of the smelter engines? The first three I designed myself: the solid steel, iron alloy, and copper alloy engines, and then of course there's Kibitz Steel Engine. Then the rest I designed for this video. So we're going to start with solid steel. Solid steel requires 40 parts per minute. The easiest way to do that is to take a Mark II belt at 120 parts per minute and divide it 3 ways. So I have a Mark IV belt feeding 2 trees of fed by Mark II belts. Each of those goes into 3 machines. The remaining 240 goes to the back end, does the same thing. At the end of it, you have 720 steel per minute, all collected up through the center. It's 8 long, 3 wide. For iron alloy, it's much the same, except it requires 20 of iron ore and copper ore, so you just use a Mark I belt instead. In this case, I'm feeding it with Mark III belts, even though that produces an extra 30 parts per minute. But since I only used Mark II and Mark I belts, only 240 parts can pass through this splitter anyways, so it'll just back up. It's literally just an item choke. Copper alloy is a little bit different. The most effective design I found was to take a Mark IV belt and a Mark V belt, remove 180 using a Mark I lifter and a Mark II lifter off of each, so that you're left with 300 and 600 each, because it requires 50 copper ore per minute and 25 iron ore per minute. And it just goes into the center and is divided evenly out from the center. At the end of it, you have 1200 copper per minute, copper ingots. The iron is 600 iron ingots per minute. I forgot to mention that. Of course, we have the traditional steel engine. It just takes 2 Mark III belts and divides them evenly into 6. The next one, it's a little interesting. Compacted steel. Not the most efficient, but aside from like petroleum coke, it is the most efficient on coal because it only requires 3 coal to make 10 steel. Although it does also require 3 sulfur. I think it's also, it's not the highest iron to steel yield, but I think it's also like total number of items to steel yield. It's the highest one there is. But that's not exactly conducive to scarcity of each resource. The other interesting part is these are decimals. That's a lot more like the assembler engine recipes. So I ready to type and just did 5-factor splits. So I made whole numbers of 450? Yeah, 450 using Mark 1, 2, and 3 belt added together. And then I did the same for the iron, or no, the compacted coal, and I just split it in half for 225. It gets split into 2, past the other side, and split into 2 again, where it goes to its factor splits. And I managed to squeeze it into the footprint. It's rather tall, but it works. I like it. So you got your splitter dividing up into your mergers, and then your other splitter taking the feedback, the 1/6 feedback, and sending it back through to splitters A and B right before the machines. Not exactly straightforward, but still cool. Next we have coke steel. Now, coke steel, you'd think, okay, it's not that great. It uses oil. But if you think about petroleum coke is a lot easier to produce in large amounts. It is a very cheap product. It does reduce your potential for plastic and rubber and fuel, but it is very interestingly, I think it's rather underestimated in most cases. Especially since coal is a limited resource in its own right. Now, the way to feed this is every machine needs 75 parts per minute of each. That requires 450 parts for every 6 machines. And the most effective way to do that was 2-to-2 splits using a Mark II belt and a Mark V belt. So they both get split in half, added to each other, and you got 2 lines of 450. You do the same with the other item. You go down the middle, each goes to their separate split trees, and you got 75 parts per minute. How much does it produce? I forget. 100, so 1200 per minute. Yep, 1200. And finally, we have aluminum ingots. Aluminum ingots is rather similar. So it requires 75 silica per minute. We already know how to do that. However, it requires 90 aluminum scrap per minute. That's a little different. The easiest way I found to do aluminum scrap is it's 540 parts per minute for every 6 machines. The easiest way to make 2 belts of 540 is to start with 2 belts, 2 Mark IV belts at 480 parts per minute. Add 60 parts to each of those from a Mark II belt split in half, and you have 2 belts of 540. Simple as that. At the end of it, it produces 60 per machine, 720 belts per minute. Or, ingots per minute. And that's literally all of the smelter engines. No, foundry engines. There we go. Yeah, that's the quick and dirty of it. I know that was probably really quick, but I just wanted to go over them as fast as possible. Mixing belt speeds is actually a really interesting way to get very specific whole part numbers in as few steps as possible. I think there are a couple other ways to do this, to get other part numbers that divide very nicely, evenly into machines, whether it's a factor split or a perfect split. Either way. Anyways, I'm DT. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you when I see you.